Day 232 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as Russia's invasion of sovereign Ukraine. Juzzy here, and today is another quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, I like to start off with some of those Russian military hardware and personnel losses in the last day. So sitting on the 13th of October there, 2022, in the last 24-hour reporting period, we have an additional 400 Russian personnel losses. In fact, a little bit more than that, which is certainly above average for any given day in this war. Also, when we take a look at the hardware, so for the armoured combat vehicles, an additional massive 11 losses in the last day, tanks 6 losses, and artillery a whopping 49 losses in the last day for Russia. And that doesn't even include 5 ammo dumps that were destroyed in the south of Russia in the last 24 hours, which, we'll never know what was in them. Oh, and down the bottom, 5 choppers, and I'll mention those in a moment there too. But first of all, we'll jump back to the map there, where Russia continues to strike deep within Ukrainian territory, particularly at locations that don't normally get a lot of attention from Russia, such as Rivne, where Ukrainian air defenses were active. Also in Zhytomyr, where air defenses in Zhytomyr, or the region there, shot down an unknown aerial object. And then also in Vinnytsia, where the Ukrainian armed forces air defenses shot down 2 kamikaze drones over the region. And there was also kamikaze strikes reported in Kyiv, the capital, where several other drones were shot down as well. So basically, this was a much smaller series of strikes in comparison to a few days ago on the 10th of October when Russia retaliated for the Crimean bridge explosions. And then we'll really start to move into the map now, today at the Donbass region, particularly at the front line of Crimea, where the Ukrainian counteroffensive operations continue in multiple fronts along this front line contact point. At the same time, it's said that the Russian forces are attempting to really reinforce their positions here and establish a second back line of defense as well. Oh, and speaking of the Russian forces really digging their heels in, the Russian forces are creating some new defense lines in the Luhansk Oblast in Kursk that are actually reminiscent of the World War II trench warfare. So here is where Kursk is, hiding in there. And we can see what they're doing with eyes in the sky, so satellite photography. So in this particular instance, the defensive line consists of 2 rows of something called Dragon's Teeth, followed by a trench, probably meant to stop vehicles, and then firing positions for infantry and vehicles as well. So like I say, they're really digging their heels in here. And the problem with Russian forces using the same army playbook from World War II trench warfare is that it's not exactly agile. And well, just imagine heavily committing to trench warfare in the age of drone warfare. This isn't 1943. Oh, and speaking of 1943, we've actually spotted some World War II era howitzer D1 models from 1943 seen in service of Russian forces around Luhansk. Now we know that they were actually transferred to the Luhansk Oblast in the end of August, but photos just appeared now. And note, the D1 first entered service with the Red Army in 1943. Now, allow me to be a little bit dramatic and say that this stuff is about 100 years old. But we can also infer that due to the use of these old howitzer systems, is that they were likely returned to use because they use their own projectile type, which differs from other 152mm platforms. So in other words, Russian forces would be dealing with a depletion of ammo. I probably should have put all this information in the funny section at the end of the video, but oh well. And also in this Donbass region, particularly the Donetsk Oblast here, well, we have the Ukrainian General Staff that's advised that some Russian units are being ordered by senior command to temporarily cease offensive operations. So the reason is the low morale of the soldiers, basically. Plus, in many cases, there's been desertion amongst the recently mobilized as well, and also a widespread refusal to follow combat orders from their commanders. And I've got some more things shortly in this video that would corroborate with that general staff statement as well, so stay tuned for a moment there. We will have a look at the date map though. There is, there has been a whole number of repelled attacks along the central Donbass front line. I don't always say that every day. It is happening every day. I repeat myself enough, so I try to not say that all the time. But as you can see, there's not a lot of changes. You might see some changes up the top, but that's actually more like a slight change in what's liberated 2 weeks ago as opposed to longer. And a small push up the top there in Kharkiv, actually. Then we move a little bit further down the map to the Zaporizhia region, to the front line town of Orikhiv. Right there, where it's actually received a real walloping of over 324 hits today. And some reports suggest Russian forces are likely reinforcing the front lines in the Zaporizhia Oblast, which is probably a wise idea if you've just illegally annexed the region that you don't even fully hold under your own control. But reinforcing the front lines along here is quite resource intensive. And as we all know pretty well by now, Russia is having issues holding all of its front lines at the same time due to the manpower and hardware depletions. And that's even during the current partial mobilization that Russia declared. And also in this area at occupied Tokmak. There it is. So no stranger to news, this location. So the Ukrainian defenders hit 3 S-300 anti-aircraft missile complexes of the Russian forces. Now, commonly the stories that actually come out of Tokmak is ammunition depot explosions, for instance. But taking out 3 air defense batteries is pretty decent. Then we'll move across to the Kherson front line on the south there, where in the last day, Ukraine downed 4 Russian Ka-52 Alligator choppers. And it was all said to have happened in the space of 18 minutes as well. Now, if this story sounds all too familiar, you would probably be right. Because Russian aircraft are getting downed every day for weeks now, as the Russian forces continue to insist on using helicopters in highly contested airspaces, which is problematic because they're super expensive and their survivability goes to near zero in an area with Ukrainian manpads. Oh, and choppers are expensive, but what's even more expensive is the time or years it takes to make a chopper pilot and make them combat ready as well. In the end, what Russia is probably trying to achieve here is to provide, but overextend ground support aircraft sorties to account for an incapable ground force. Now, in this frontline region here that we probably know all too well at the moment, Russian sources continued to claim that the Ukrainian forces are conducting ground attacks in the northwestern front here. And some analytics suggests that Russian troops are likely trying to consolidate a new front line here that goes from Mylov all the way west of it. Again, I've said this before, but it looks like all of these oinky pigs here, which indicate Russian forces or battalions, are creating multiple or 2 lines of defense to sort of knuckle down and, like I say, dig their heels in as much as they can. Oh, and also in the Kherson region, we have some reports of unconfirmed reports, to be fair, of Russian soldiers that mobilized near Kherson. They killed the commander who prevented them from surrendering. Now, that's some serious mutiny there. Perhaps it's happening more often now, and that's just one of the few stories that ever get out and see the light of day. But when I find a story like this, I do like to share it with you guys, such as when the Russian contract Wagner group had a shootout with the regular Russian infantry over war loot, because it just goes to show the generally low level of morale and lack of cohesiveness of the Russian forces in their totality that plays out as such on the larger battlefield as well. So perhaps, in other words, a lack of general coordination from the Russian side. Then we'll just move quickly across to Mykolaiv, where I've got some Telegram information here, although actually, no, we've got a bit more than that. So there's been a bit of shelling in Mykolaiv. Russia also fired 8 S-300 missiles at Mykolaiv, hitting a high-rise apartment building there too, for which I've got a photo. I really do guarantee that Mykolaiv is going to get a whole bunch of new, probably NATO air defense systems shortly. And I'll mention that in the news in a second. But we'll just quickly move across to Crimea, where there's a huge backlog of trucks waiting to cross the Kerch Strait, seen in satellite imagery taken yesterday. And this is a great time to repeat myself on the channel and say the good old military folklore that says infantry wins battles but logistics wins wars. And if Russian logistics weren't already under stress in the south, now they've currently got no train line in the south, which the Russian war machine really hungers and thrives for: train cargo. And also here, it's been said that the Russian ferry system is replacing the Crimean Bridge road span and is backed up quite a bit as these trucks wait to board the ferry, which is said to be a 3 to 4 day wait. That's what they're saying there. So a 5-minute bridge trip, now a half a week wait. Great. Now we'll move across to the news, where there was the UN General Assembly update for the recent vote regarding the Russian annexation of the Ukrainian oblasts. So a massive 143 countries voted in favor of condemning Russia's annexation of the 4 Ukrainian territories. Surprise, surprise. And guess which countries voted against it? Russia for one, and 4 of Russia's bestest buddies, such as Belarus, the dictatorship of North Korea, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Nicaragua. And there was also 35 or so abstentions from countries that didn't want to get involved with the current conflict. And in some more news, Russia is going to upgrade 800 of its T-62 tanks for combat use in Ukraine. But of course they are. Up to 40% of Russia's entire tank fleet is arguably these 60-year-old Soviet-era T-62 tanks, many of which have been oxidizing from outside storage for maybe 30 plus years. So we can somewhat infer that this means that all newer T-64, T-72 and T-80 tanks are a depleted resource and new ones cannot be produced as quickly. Oh, and one thing, Russia said that they're upgrading the tanks. Probably a little bit of a puff piece or propaganda, which may have some truth to it. Sure, I'll give them that. But a more fitting description or term would probably be that they're repairing them instead. Oh, and this 800 tank project is said to happen over a 3-year period. Problem is they need new tanks now, not old tanks a long time away from now. And in all of this, I feel like a T-34 meme for the old tanks, the old World War II tanks should come in handy right now. And next up in news, the UK will deliver ARAM missiles to Ukraine as a response to the massive countrywide Russian strikes on Ukraine on October the 10th. So ARAMs are anti-aircraft missiles that are compatible with the NASAMS air defense systems that Ukraine will be getting soon from the States. So these are NATO level air defense systems, modern ones. And in similar news, France will supply Ukraine with air defense systems as well, including radars and missiles in the coming weeks. And this was also in response to the recent Russian barrage of strikes on Ukraine. And also, even the Netherlands will provide Ukraine $15 million in air defense missiles to equip Ukraine. And on top of that, the first IRIS-T air defense system from Germany was delivered to Ukraine yesterday. So that's good to see. They're sending a few more, 3 or 4 more in the upcoming months as well. So you may see a pattern forming here from all of these news pieces. Effectively, Russia strikes hard into Ukraine. Then the international community comes in support of Ukraine, causing Ukraine to soon have one of the densest air defense systems in the world. And in some other news, 10,000 Ukrainian servicemen of the second wave from training in Great Britain are returning back to Ukraine now. Basically, Britain announced months ago that they have a 10K training capacity. The first batch of 10K troops were deployed in the Luhansk region, and this would be the second wave now. So this is a pretty nice, even humanitarian example of Ukraine not taking the cannon fodder approach to their soldiers, as Russia does, where Russia just sends their troops into the front line, literally the front line with no training. And this is actually quite common, as Russia attempts to immediately refill the frontline ranks after receiving losses. And in some other news slash funny, I suppose, a Russian media outlet named Meduza reported a single Russian father of 4 was reportedly fined $789 and sentenced to 2 weeks in jail by Moscow authorities on Thursday for listening to Ukrainian music in his car. This seems like the mark of a dictatorship. For instance, the suspension of civil liberties. The guy's just listening to music that's Ukrainian. So yeah, a bit of an odd one there. And just very lastly, let's call it the lighter side of news today. Maybe it's my idea of lighter only, but we'll see. So this video is of 5 Russian soldiers who willfully surrendered to the Ukrainian armed forces after being treated pretty poorly by their own Russian commanders. They were mobilized on the 27th of September, and within 3 days, they ended up in the trenches of Svatove, which is actually quite a frontline and strategic defense point for the Russian forces right now. So they arrived in Svatove with no training, no instructions from their commanders, then no food or water for 2 days. Then it started raining in the trenches, so the trenches turned to clay and mud. So they decided to pack it in and walk up the main road, found a Ukrainian checkpoint, and surrendered peacefully. Good for them. And also note the age demographics here. So looks like a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, and 3 50-plus-year-olds. So these types of age demographics should not be seen in war in a partial or even a full military mobilization. Certainly for a general country-wide civilian mobilization, that's the case. But that's not the Russian state of play right now. So that is all quite odd too. Anyway, these guys are getting a warm meal and a comfortable bed tonight. So fear not for them. And again, good for them. Okay guys, thanks for watching. Apologies for yesterday, a bit of an emergency situation. Seen some comments there, I appreciate them. There was a Don Juan and a few others that may be a bit concerned. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.